Deputy Attorney General Abba silence Godfred Dame abusuan silence na wa silence no wa kyerɛ say ono eye Deputy Attorney General eba law na onimdiye ankasa na mobeka ya endrada Godfred Dame de nsɛm bi eba betu dwa o kyerɛ say eye charges eye Attorney General wa drop against eye former NAFCO CEO no Addo no abusuan oni evidence bia and case ni so no enam say Attorney General any evidence no ontumi proceed case na we and a Deputy Attorney General akyerɛ ne sɛ wo krampo no ɛyɛ sɛ wɔka wano tum na oba eba be hyia me court wɔsɛ shut up and meet me at the court abusua Deputy Attorney General wa silence ɛyɛ Godfred Dame wɔsɛ wo Godfred Dame kra no court no kra no ontumi mba be represent ɛyɛ wo client ugina bonten na osori na na media no so na o to emfuturu gu amanfo ni sa defending now who defend the NPP criminals no enye ade a bebo Deputy Attorney General ono ene ka kire Godfred Dame abusua mom yanko na yanko tie ensma ekos unsubscribe ya subscribe na hit on the notification bell so na be any update be drop no wonso unsa ebetumi akabi na mobeka ya eye lawyer Martin Pebu eba edi kan be so ejana no beebi ana Godfred Dame ekono na opese o attack Attorney General Emma Endra lawyer Martin Pebu eba holding on. Na Godfred Dame antrefo eno and a Deputy Attorney General watching it. Mommy yanko na yanko tie.
I think essentially we are entrenching the latter. You look at the actions of the Attorney General. The first action he took when he became Attorney General was to discontinue the prosecution of cases, which essentially were the showpiece of the fight against corruption and the promotion of accountability in relevant sectors of the economy, the banking sector, and what have you, and all that. And that clearly destroyed or shook the confidence of the people in the government's resolve to ensure that there was accountability or proper determination of those cases. Then the next move he made was to lump a number of persons who were perceived to be appointees of the ESWA administration before the court. So that clearly showed a contradiction, glaring contradiction. It's the case of selective justice, that in respect of matters that the court had actually charged that the accused persons in it had a case to answer, you discontinue prosecution because they affected members of your government or members of your political party, and then instructively you put before the court members of the opposition on similar charges, even less serious and all. And indeed, the subsequent developments that have unfolded show clearly that these prosecutions were actually thought through and all.
We know that the Attorney General has discretion to do so. So what then is the concern? Is it the decision itself or the reasons assumed to be why the cases were discontinued or the cases that were selected to be discontinued?
But of course, I think both. I mean, first and foremost, the Attorney General has the prerogative to prosecute, but it doesn't mean that procedural power ought to be exercised unreasonably.
That's what the current AG did, eh?
Well, yes, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, there's no justification for discontinued cases that the courts say that there are cases for the accused persons to answer. Some time ago, I made a point that there's a need for us to have good men in office. When I said good men in office, people making casting all kinds of aspersions against me and all that. But indeed, all we need is persons who are properly, who exercise their discretion when it comes to public office properly.
The current administration says its anti-corruption efforts are about recovering public funds and then holding officials accountable. From where you sit, what concerns you most about the process so far?
The question is there a process at all? Is there a process? Is there a verifiable process? I think there's none. I think there's none. I think recently I was reading the news and I saw that an ITR request that had been presented by a member of the public to the Attorney General requiring a disclosure of funds recovered in the do-for matter, and the Attorney General replied that he could not deliver same. He could not deliver any such report.
It falls under the category of exceptions under the RTI.
So you are talking about how do we ensure that
Now, Deputy Attorney General Justice Shremsai has refuted claims that the former NAFCO CEO, Addo, was denied access to his lawyers while in Ioku's custody. Hanan Wahab and his wife were rearrested at the court's premises on May 5th after the Attorney General withdrew charges including stealing, money laundering, and defrauding by false pretenses. Shremsai, in a rebuttal, claims that officials were rather waiting for Hanan's lawyers to interrogate their client.
It shouldn't be too dramatic about this. I spoke with him in the courts on Hanan in particular, and he made some requests, some of which have been granted, others may be granted in the future, and others have been refused.
He says that the issue of fresh charges that you talk about, fresh evidence, I beg your pardon, is non-existent. He says there's no case pending, there's no fresh evidence. What's your response to that?
How would he know? You see, instead of him to accompany his clients to do interrogation, through the interrogation, he's sitting on TV, calling to radio programs and talking. But his client will be going for interrogation today. He was discharged yesterday. He'll be going for interrogation today. That is when he will know. If he chooses not to be on radio and follow him, he will definitely know where the fresh evidence. He has no basis to know whether there's fresh evidence or not, because he has not accompanied his client to the office of.
And another thing he says is that he was denied access. He says they were denied access, but you were saying that they didn't come. So what exactly is the situation?
That is false. Completely false. His client was not well and was taken to the clinic yesterday. When they came back, the interrogators were waiting for him to come, because you cannot interrogate a suspect in the absence of his lawyer.
He's also expressed confidence in securing a conviction against the former NAFCO boss.
Those of you who were in court, when we were withdrawing the charges, he was on our side. He even told the judge that he is familiar, he did a lot of withdrawals, to the extent that even the co-accused counsel was talking to the two of us and said that we were politicians and he is a professional lawyer. So in the courtroom, he understood and did not object to anything that happened. I was surprised for him when I saw him on radio and TV, making it look like he wasn't. In fact, the other counsel was actually pointing to the two of us that, yes, we were politicians and he is not, so he has the right to complain. And he was telling the other lawyer not to complain because this is normal. So to come out and make it, and in any case, haven't we seen, has he not done this before? Is it improper to withdraw charges when you discover new evidence? And he's trying to lump this up together with some objections he raised, which had nothing to do with the case, as if it is because of his objections that this has happened. And I think that, you know, I don't want to say much about this, but there's so much issues, a lot of issues of integrity here and professionalism, which I believe are not being respected.
Justice Shremsai, in previous times, your boss has been very confident about the cases that you're working on and being confident that monies will be recovered, people will be punished. What's the level of confidence you're going in with this issue of fresh, evidence?
We are still very confident that we have a strong case which will lead to conviction. There's no doubt about that. Fresh evidence means you have discovered something new. As to whether that will lead to new charges or will beef up the prevailing charges, or will even change some of the charges. That is why we need to interrogate and confirm with the accused person, particularly his side of the story, before we...
This could mean for emergency care delivery, the general public have been left demanding more action and accountability. This afternoon, we'll explore the key findings of the committee report and revisit the day of the unfortunate incident. But first, here's a report capturing the full details.
The Ministry of Health set up a committee led by Professor Agyemangbedu Akosa, a renowned pathologist, to investigate the death of Charles Emisa, a 29-year-old engineer who died on February 6, 2026, after being denied emergency care at 3 major hospitals in Accra. Charles Emisa was struck in a hit-and-run incident. Officers from the National Ambulance Service responded promptly and stabilized him at the scene. However, despite being alive and in critical condition, he was turned away by 3 hospitals on the claim of no bed. Presenting the findings to the Health Minister, Professor Bedu Akosa said Charles Emisa's death could have been avoided.
The pathology confirms a slow death from medical neglect and was not from the instant trauma. What it means is that if at any of these facilities there had been medical intervention, Charles Amisa could have survived. Charles Amisa died of exsanguination, excessive loss of blood. Death of Charles Amisa could have been avoided by medical intervention at the police hospital, the Greater Accra Regional Hospital, or Kolebu Teaching Hospital.
He explained that medical professionals failed to observe their ethical duty, leading to Emisa's death. Professor Akosa also highlighted key findings from the ambulance reports.
If the ambulance crew had applied compression on the laceration and packed the deep wound prior to transportation, they could have stopped the bleeding. If in the hospitals they had either given intravenous fluids or whole blood, either in police, the Greater Accra Regional Hospital, or Kolebu Teaching Hospital, they would have maintained life. Hospital failed to triage the patient and initiate stabilizing interventions. The medical staff on duty at the police hospital, Greater Accra Regional Hospital, and Kolebu Teaching Hospital failed to attend to Charles Amisa when he was in a life-threatening condition, and this led to his avoidable death.
The Health Minister, Kwabena Minta Akando, announced that disciplinary actions against the cited medical professionals will take immediate effect.
I want to accordingly direct my Chief Director, the Chief Director of the Ministry of Health, to write to the following people, the following health professionals and their hospitals and their regulators, that disciplinary actions be taken against them. I understand some of these facilities have already started disciplinary actions against some of these people, and I'll urge them to expedite action on them and their respective regulators must also do same. Another recommendation that the Critical Care and Emergency Center or Emergency Hospital at the Ghana Armed Forces must be also made available to the public. It is a national asset that must be optimized. And so His Excellency the President has directed that that must also be made available to every Ghanaian.
Now, following the findings of the committee to investigate the death of Mr. Amisa, his sister, Dr. Matilda Amisa, has welcomed disciplinary action taken against the medical practitioners found negligent in his case. Dr. Amisa acknowledged that systemic challenges may have played a role, but stressed that the practitioners could still have acted differently to prevent the tragedy.
The investigation was extensive. And I know that the sanctions will be dealt with according to the motherboards, depending on the health workers' place. So I agree with them with what they said. So the timing was very crucial for his life. For him to be saved. There may be some reasons. I'm sure they would have the medical officers, the health workers, and then the nurses would have their own reasons for what happened. But it cannot explain how long it took them to attend to Charles Amisa. So I think that there may be some systemic challenges, but indeed they could have done something. I would say that the system failed Charles because he's not the only one. People come and tell their stories, and this Charles Amisa is not the first of such. So it has been something that has been going on for some time, and voices of such patient relatives have not been heard yet. So I would say that our emergency response is flawed. Equipping national ambulance to be able to handle emergencies, even in because the ambulance is also technically a hospital. We can make it that way that even patients' lives can be saved. But they don't have the necessary equipment to save life. The resources, the human, the personnel with the knowledge of, acute care in these ambulances, paramedics and all that, they also need a lot of training. We also need to equip our lower facilities. We as health workers have a very big role in saving lives. We know that it will take a while for the systemic structures to be put in place, but what are we as doctors, as nurses, healthcare professionals doing in the interim? If you are too tired, you can escalate. If you need help, you can call for help and help will come to you. We haven't decided on anything yet. We were speculating and we didn't want to, step on toes and then run into, take actions that may not even be the reasons why this happened. We wanted the investigations to come to an end before if we can actually sit down and then discuss this.
So that's sister of Charles Emisa. We're going to take you onto the dashboard, and this is where we enter into the by the numbers segment of today's edition of the bulletin as well, in relation to this particular subject matter, and we consider as well the recommendations. Then we'll go back onto Zoom and engage as well our special guest to understand whether or not progress can be made from here in relation to the recommendations of the committee and the work that they've put together. But I'm taking you to the dashboard right now to revisit the incident and whether or not lessons have been learned, and possibly based on the recommendations, it tallies with all of the conversations which came up in the aftermath of that unfortunate incident. And so we go back to that fateful day on February 6th, where the emergency medical technicians of the ambulance service, it's through their sit rep, we have an appreciation as to what really played out on that day in the lead up to all of these investigations, which now are being told never again should this happen where an individual will lose their life because of the unavailability of bed. And so they got a call between the regions of 10:32, arrived at the scene in 3 minutes, and undertook swift professional mobilization, right? At that instance, vitals were taken of the patients, and because I will not seek to apportion to myself being a medical expert, this is what they had in terms of the vitals of the patients. BP reading 120/90, the pulse was at 100 BPM, there was SP02, 99%, and then respiratory as well. You see that in that light. Of the many things they found, which they did, was they found him conscious, his bleeding was controlled with the gauze, but now we are understanding from the committee and the work that they did was that pressure could have been applied beyond the application of just the gauze to seek to stop the bleeding. Pressure could have been applied to do a bit more to help the patient as well, who was in that position as and when they found him. Cervical collar was applied, oxygen therapy, then he was log rolled onto the ambulance service, and then the journey began in finding him emergency care. The police hospital was the first place. They rejected him because there was no bed. What was interesting in all of this was that the crew offered to have the ambulance trolley used. That did not happen, and so they had to ferry him from there to the Greater Accra Regional Hospital, which is the Ridge Hospital as we know it. But no vitals were taken as at that point. And we heard Professor Bedu Akosa mention triagen. I'll go back to my expert on that and ask if that exists within our health infrastructure space. But at the Ridge Hospital as well, by then, 26 minutes had passed since the ambulance service received the call, arrived, got him on board the ambulance, and was seeking to have medical care afforded to him. He was rejected there as well. The reason was that there was no bed, and it was an identical outcome. No admission, no vitals checked as well. And it is fair to infer that they would have offered to have him checked on the ambulance trolley as well. Then they went to the Kolebu Teaching Hospital. By then,
Abusia, when it ends my apostle, our political highway. So Godfred Dame, NHS, and Mguasi Chinchirichi, Achina, Deputy Attorney General, Edina to Tony Leveler, or Chese Ombra, na Ombra be meeting of courts, na baby on an amna, or to Boba Park and so on, and yet Adia, Ebeboy. But I must some penny, Cocotiza, and some way, Edemai, aha, a gossip politics TV. So.